Morning.
Morning.
Morning. Welcome to our Uspire Discover Day, everybody. You can see some names who are new to us and some old friends as well. So hi there. We're just going to give literally another 60 seconds and then we're going to get going.
Morning, guys.
Hi, Dennis. How are you? Long time no
Amanda,
see.
How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, and you. A number of our friends from the Kerry Food Field Sales team. We were going great guns over there. I think we have a number of friends from Kraft Heinz as well. So some of our some new teams from Kraft Heinz. Hi, Paula. How are you doing?
Morning. Hi, Amanda.
Good morning. Okay, I think we are all done. So JB, I'm just looking for a nod for you and think we'll go. Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Let me share my screen. Fantastic. We are so delighted that you're with us here today. The reason that we are delighted that you're going to spend a couple of hours with us is that, notwithstanding that we're going to talk about an amazing subject, which is really, really critical right now, is that our vision at Uspire is to create a community of the finest commercial leaders in the world. And in order to do that, we have to know you. So we are super delighted that you're here today with us because we're going to be able to do exactly that. For those of you who don't know us, we do three things. We help our clients in three ways. We help them with consulting around problem solving, growth strategies and commercial strategies and facilitating at senior level. We help them with academies all over the world, actually. Two of our team have just come in from an international academy right now where we've been working in a different time zone. And we do that with our internal champions. So we have got a number of those and we'll talk through those as we go through today. And some of them are here to help us today too. And finally, our network, which is the Uspire network is intended to bring continuous development and commercial support into a community of what we love to think is the finest commercial leaders in the world. So how do we do that for our network? There are three things that we do, three things. We bring award-winning speakers. We run fantastic commercial coaching and mentoring. All of our directors have been there in your shoes as sales directors and commercial directors. I've managing directors in the past. And then we run peer-to-peer events, which we call think tanks. And so today is going to be a mixture of all of those things, actually. All of those things. So we're really looking forward to it. Let's get going. So today we've called this session Discover the Power of Your Negotiating Hats. And Jonathan Bruff, who is our managing partner and friend, are going to be doing that today with us. Jonathan has been in the arena of negotiation, both in terms of procurement and buying, and in terms of supply and manufacture for quite a lot of years. And he is our expert in negotiation. It's the first time Jonathan has done a Discover Day with us, and we're absolutely delighted that he's going to be leading us through today. So without further ado, it's over to you, JB.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And as she said, we're delighted that you could all find the time to join us. And I'm very excited to be here today. This is, again, my first Discovery event. But, you know, we're spending a lot of time transforming how we deliver a learning and developing experience. And this technology has been central to that. I just want to start by reflecting on the last 18 months. And it's clear that it's been probably the most challenging time in any of our professional careers. And it is also clear that we're going to be facing more challenges in the future. But one of the things that struck me when I was putting together this session is that there's also been some benefits. And these benefits don't get a lot of airtime. And let me just share a few examples with you. Our planet has had a chance to breathe. As CO2 emissions have plummeted, with less planes in the sky, less cars on our roads, people have adapted. They've got around differently. They've walked, they've cycled, they've even got on electric scooters. So it's clear that we have an ability to adapt to the circumstances we're facing. The canals in Venice, Italy are clear and blue and teeming with fish. It's a place I love, and the people who live in Venice, Italy have never seen that before. The technology we have has kept us connected. It's transformed how many of us work. It's transformed how we learn, how we play, how we care for our loved ones, how we shop, and it will continue to transform how we live. In many cases, those of us that have had a lot of time previously traveling have now got more time to invest in perhaps learning a new skill, or just investing in quality time with our families. And it is clear that the trauma that we have suffered, and if you were with us earlier in June when Maliki ran that session on trauma, it is a trauma, and for many of us it continues to be that. It is fundamentally changing the way that we work and live, and I think it will have some long-term implications. One of the things it's done is it's given us more time to think, and in some cases more time than we really wanted to think. And I think for those of us that are naturally reflective, it's actually been easy. And for those of us that perhaps struggle and are more action-oriented, I think it's been more of a challenge. When I was growing up, my mother used to say to me, "Jonathan, why don't you think before you act?" And it was usually just after I'd acted before thinking. And that stayed with me. So for many of us who are action-oriented, we need a reason, we need a mechanism, we need an opportunity for deep thought. Just raise your hand if you, like me, struggle to find the time and a process for deep creative thinking. Just raise your hand. Yeah, so I'm not alone. And I think it's super important that we develop this skill. So why are we talking about thinking when this session is really about negotiating? Well, our central provocation is at the heart of effective negotiating is considered thought. Thinking about a situation from different perspectives, creating different options and solutions. You're going to hear some of that today from my colleagues, is going to increase the chance of you getting to a successful outcome in your negotiations. In advance of today, we shared a template. I'm going to just put it up. Hopefully you've had a chance to either print this out. It's a one-page template. Maybe you've got it on your iPad if you're good with the technology. We'd like you to have that in the background today and to capture your insight. As we work through the sessions we're going to take you through, I want you to perhaps capture your insights under your negotiating challenge. And then we'll give you a chance in some breakout sessions to share some of those insights. Hopefully at the end of the session, you'll be able to walk away with something really tangible that you can use in your business. So if we accept that thinking is an important skill and one we want to develop, one of the leading exponents of creative thinking was a gentleman called Professor Edward de Bono. Sadly, he very recently passed away in June this year, but he spent his entire 88 years and all his professional life sharing his thought processes, sharing his ideas about how you can create new ways to think. He actually was the originator of the term lateral thinking. And during that extraordinary life, he wrote more than 80 books. They were translated into 46 languages. He was even nominated and shortlisted for the Nobel Economics Prize in 2005. And right up to the end of his life, he continued to share his theories, his concepts about improving how we think. And it's that passion for thinking that inspired us to create this session. As we go forward in the next months, I think we are going to face some of the most difficult negotiations in our businesses that many of us have ever faced. And we firmly believe that the ability to think deeply, to think laterally, to think creatively is going to be a vital skill. I want to just pause for a second. We're going to run a quick poll. I think Chester's going to run this for us. And the question we want to ask all of you is, what are the key drivers behind your current negotiating challenges? We've got a list that we're going to put up, and please feel free to select as many from that list as are relevant. If there are others that are not on that list, then please do add them into the chat and we'll capture them. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to respond to that poll, and I'm going to share some other thoughts.
The poll is live now.
Good. Okay. So we'll see that emerge, won't we, in front of our eyes, Chester? Glory of technical. Okay. So skills shortage, yeah. Security of supply, capacity. Raising prices, yeah, new supply chains. Good. All right. Well, I think that reinforces some of what we're seeing. We'll share the results of that survey as part of the output from this event. So thanks for running that, Chester.
Okay.
I was talking to a customer very recently, in the last week or so, and one of the things she said to me was her team were seeing a tsunami of requests from suppliers for price increases, and that her team were completely overwhelmed by the number and volume of these requests. And when I talked to her in a bit more detail, she said the reason her team were overwhelmed was because they didn't have any joined up thinking. They hadn't actually foreseen that this was going to happen at this particular moment in time. And when we look across the customers and the sectors that we work with, and this is internationally, what we see is something I would call rebalancing. We're entering an inflationary period, and that could last for 6, 12 months, even longer, where we are going to have some significant cost pressures. And we think that's for 4 reasons. The first reason is that many organizations have been adapting to survive, and they've absorbed the costs over the last 12 months, but those are now starting to filter through, and they have to filter through to protect margins. Secondly, stocks that were perhaps at a high level 12 months ago have now been diminished, maybe sometimes exhausted, and they haven't been replenished to the same level. So we're running short of certain supplies, and construction industry is a great example, but there are others. Thirdly, there are very few companies, surprisingly, that have taken the opportunity with this historically low cost of borrowing to invest in new capacity. And because of that, we've got now increasing demand and more customers chasing the same goods and services. And that supply-demand imbalance will push prices higher. And the last area is raw materials, freight, and labor costs, and they're all heading north. So I think it's going to be more important than ever that you and your team's skills in developing really sound negotiation strategies and executing those to deliver successful agreements that will work for your businesses. This is going to be vital for your success going forward. So can we just close that poll, I think now, Chester? Let me share with you our agenda for today. Hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to walk you through. We're going to cover, so we talked about being inspired by Edward de Bono. In particular, we were inspired by his 6-hat thinking. So what we've done is we've actually created an approach and a tool and a template that will help you and your team effectively put on each of these hats and consider the challenges that you're facing. And in our first session, which will run till about 10 past 10, we're going to cover the first three hats. I'll talk about sequence in a moment, but sequence is important. Pippa is going to help with the white hat. Mark's going to don the yellow hat, and then Colin is going to don the red hat. We'll then put you into some breakout groups that we will join, and we'll start to just share some of the insights that you may have come across during those sessions, you may have captured. We'll then take a break at 10:20, just for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll work through the next three hats before we break out again. And at the end of that, we'll pull it all together. We'll have a Q&A session, and we'll share some of the emerging themes. And then just before we close, we're going to spend some time talking about network and coaching. So that's our plan for today. So let me get into it. We talked a little bit about Edward de Bono, and he was an inspired gentleman, and a little bit perhaps dated in terms of some of his presentation skills. But if you have a chance, I would recommend that you read his book, Six Thinking Hats. And if that's too much time for you, you don't have the time, then I would recommend you Google or YouTube his 1994 lecture. He had a very dry sense of humor. Perhaps some of what he says is a little bit non-PC now, but actually his thinking style is still very relevant today, and some of his techniques are really fantastic. We believe it's a very powerful way to brainstorm, and it will transform how you look at different challenges you're facing. If we agree that thinking is a skill that should and can be developed, then this parallel way of thinking, I feel, is something that we should be applying to the current negotiations challenges. Lateral thinking, what do we mean by lateral thinking? What does Edward de Bono mean by lateral thinking? Well, it's not the reasoning that is obvious. If you look at a situation, there will be some things that jump off the page. They're obvious. That's not what lateral thinking is about. Lateral thinking is trying to unearth the things that are not obvious. And that comes from putting these different hats on, these different perspectives. It's a spectrum of thought, and the sequence does matter. So I mentioned the sequence earlier. If you've come across Edward de Bono's six-hat thinking before, you may have used it in an innovation context, and you would probably use these hats in a different sequence. We've chosen to start with the white hat, and the white hat is going to be, there's my white hat, is going to be introduced to you by Pippa, one of our colleagues, and that essentially is creating the context. It's the facts that relate to your negotiation challenge. Pippa and I have done a lot of work. Pippa's got a background in retail. We've done a lot of work. We deliver the Aldi Academy together, so that's something that we've been working on since 2017. But Pippa has a huge background in retail and actually heads up our marketing team as well. So that'll be Pippa. Pippa will then pass to Mark Francis, yellow hat. Those of you who know Mark will know that he wouldn't have accepted any other hat. He'll be talking about the benefits, the upside, how you energize, how you create a can-do attitude in your business. And when you're facing the sort of challenges that we are all facing, it's important that we're up for it, that we actually step up to the plate. Mark will then be passing to Colin. Colin, because Colin is wearing a red shirt because he couldn't find a red hat. But Colin has a background working in many different businesses in many different sectors, and we're very fortunate to have him on our board. He will give you a perspective very much about intuition. You know, we're a product of our experience, and we shouldn't suppress our instincts. And one of the things that Colin is really good at doing is taking that intuition and turning it into effective business decisions. So Colin will be doing that. We'll then take a break, and we'll share some of that thinking in breakout groups. And then when we come back, I'll be donning my black hat. Now, I'm going to try not to be too sort of morose about this, but black hat thinking is actually all about understanding the obstacles, thinking about the things that may trip you up. perhaps considering different scenarios and maybe different third parties. And I'll be talking a little bit more about my experience and why for our business I tend to be the one that wears the black hat. I'll then be passing on to Chester. Now, Chester's green hat is better than my green hat. Mine's a little bit dark, but Chester will be talking about essentially creating options. So it's really the desire that we have for you to think more flexibly. You know, some of the agreements that perhaps used to work in your organization aren't going to be fit for purpose going forward. So you need to be more flexible. They need to be able to adapt to the changing circumstances. None of us have got a crystal ball, but what we can see is change is happening very fast. So Chester, I think you've already got your green hat on, Chester, which is excellent. And then lastly, Chester will pass to Amanda, and Amanda will be pulling it all together. There she is with her blue hat. And Amanda will be putting together the what, the how, the who, and the when, and actually sharing with you some real examples of how we deliver negotiation programs and academies. And I think indeed we've also got one of our customers, I think Andrew from Terry is going to support that as well. So you're going to hear from a customer about how we helped them implement a new way of negotiating and planning. So that's the format for today. And before we pass over to Pippa, I've just got a couple more things I wanted to share. One of the things that Edward de Bono said is that 90% of the errors we make are not a fault of logic, they're actually a result of perception. So one of the things that we can do is change our perceptions. He talked about EBNA, that's his acronym. I think Mark wouldn't be happy with that, but what he meant by that is our thinking is often excellent, but not enough. It's excellent, but not enough. So today is about taking your excellent thinking and building on it. Okay, and lastly, before we put our thinking hats on, I just want to say, please enjoy this session, please interact. If you've got questions and you don't want to disrupt the flow, please drop them onto the chat and we will capture those, and we may capture them during the actual sessions themselves. But take the time to reflect and think about the negotiation challenge you're facing. So without any more to do, let me pass on to Pippa with her white hat. Thank you, Pippa.
Good morning, everybody. And firstly, we may be donning our white hats today, but it isn't for real. You don't really have to wear these hats. It's about your thinking process, because those of you that have bigger hair obviously have a bit of a challenge with these kind of hats. So the white hat. What is the white hat? The white hat is really the gathering of relevant, factual information. When you wear the white hat, you are going to be thinking about objective data and very, very neutral. What does neutral mean in this context? It's the facts, just the facts. Emotions, judgments, individual perceptions and interpretations are kept quiet whilst you're in the white hat thinking mode. I like, we must, it would be great if, I want, is absolutely the noise that you don't hear whilst wearing the white hat. It's a great one to get your thinking started and is often used at the beginning and at the end of any thinking process that you may be in, whether that's a negotiation, whether that's a board meeting, whether that's an innovation session. At the beginning, as we're using it today, we're going to use it to be gathering the facts and the information that we need. But if you used it at the end and spent the time to think about what has already happened, you could use it to question and validate some of the ideas and thought processes that have already come through. So today we're going to do it at the start. And we should always, particularly in negotiation, take this really valuable time to think about what it is we need. And if I've got any Harry Potter fans out there, this hat, I want you to think about it as the seeking hat. What do you need to find? What is it you need to know? So think of a white sheet of paper, nothing on it, and it's ready to be filled with factual information. This is the white hat. So you all need a hat. I'm not going to ask you to put one on, but if you've got the template, brilliant, we're going to write on that. If you haven't, grab a piece of paper and you can draw a hat. That's not an artist's competition. Don't mind what kind of hat. This, where's my camera? I'm going to turn my background off so you can see it. A very simple hat will be just fine. That is the extent of my drawing capabilities. So what is our thinking when we wear the white hat? For ease, I've put it into 3 stages to gather the information and the facts that we've got. So the first one, whilst you're thinking or listening in your negotiation, is facts. What information do you know? What information do you already have? What information do you need? Often we're presented with a little bit of information. Prices are increasing for 5% from November. Fact. Is that enough? Is there more that we need to know? The sales are down by 20%. Yeah, that might be fact. You've already got that information. But what information do you really need? Availability has been the best it's been this year. Great, that could be fact. But what's really behind it to enable you to make an informed decision? Second one, nice and easy. Questions. What don't you know that you need to find out? Often there is more than the initial informative fact. How are you going to go and get that information? How important is that information really? In practical terms, is it going to affect your decision, your negotiation, your advantage? Where can you get it? And how? For example, why are they increasing the prices? What is the market price behind that? How have those cost prices been developed in order to justify a cost price increase? What other factors are there that are now beginning to include into this cost price? How are you going to be able to demonstrate that? Which takes us on to our last third point, evidence. Remember, it's the facts. It's just the facts. The objective data, the information to prove that, not what you think, not what you want to happen, we're leaving the emotions behind. It's the reliable, factual information. Things like, show me how the costs are broken down. Lots of people work with open book trading now. Let's demonstrate this. Let's work through where we are. Let's prove and justify clearly what information and the facts that we have. As Jonathan said earlier, you're facing a huge amount of business challenges at the moment and a tsunami of price increases coming through. But my experience in the negotiation is if we get this stage really clear and you understand the facts and you take the emotion and the problems away, you start from a really solid foundation for negotiation. So using your hat, if you've drawn one, or your template, I'd like you to take just a minute to think about what situation you are facing into right now, whether it be as a team, whether it may be a negotiation, whether it might be an annual business plan, it might be a cost price, and try and make it a broad problem, because we're going to go through each of the hats, and it would be really good if you could use the example that you're facing to work through today. In that hat, using the facts, the questions, and the evidence, jot down some of the key areas, particularly on the questions and the evidence, what you would need to start that thinking process off in that negotiation. You can write it on your hat, or you can type it in directly. You've got the PDF forms. You can be as general or as specific as you like. Just make a note that if it's general, you might have to drill down a little bit further. and really try hard to prevent any emotions or your own interpretations going in. Neutral, white, clean, white sheet of paper. So whilst you're writing, you've got 1 more minute, I will just call out a few questions just to prompt your mind to say, have I got this in my head? What is it I know? Is it factual? What don't you know that you might need to find out? How important is this information? Do I really need it? Is it going to affect my decision? Do I have this information? Can I get this information? And is it reliable? So, the white hat, neutral, no emotions, it's the facts, just the facts, what you need before you move on to the next stage, which is the red hat. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, yellow hat, and I'm going to hand over to Mark in his yellow hat. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Pippa. Yellow hat, optimist's hat. Yellow hat, optimist's hat. Now, why is that relevant to negotiation? It's massively relevant to negotiation because there are 2 words that sum up the behavior I'd love to inspire in you in this session about a yellow hat. And those 2 words are aim high. Aim high. It's so easy, particularly in the world that we're living in now, to think about probability. Now, probably we're going to have a supply chain issue because we haven't got any drivers. Oh my goodness me. It's so easy to think about probability. The optimist hat thinks about possibility. What could be possible if we get everything right in this negotiation and we aim high? What is possible? So notice it's an optimism, it's a positivity, and it's also about value, joint value for me and for my customer. So I do have to articulate that when I'm wearing the yellow hat. But you start from a premise of, if it was impossible to fail, what could we achieve in this negotiation and in this relationship? If it was impossible to fail, what could we achieve? So Chester and I were talking to a potential customer 2 months ago, based in Japan, leading a major Japanese business. And it's so easy as the negotiator salespeople to think, oh, if we're lucky, we might get a little bit of business because we're an English-speaking company by background, trying to sell to a Japanese company. But if you don't bring an optimist's hat, your behavior then in that sell and negotiation is a losing behavior. So our optimist hat said, of course they want to do business with us. And these are the key outcomes in an ideal world that we would like from this relationship. Aim high. Now, sometimes you have to take your white hat off to do that, because white hat is fact, precision, neutrality, and yellow hat is optimism, possibility thinking. So I am going to ask you to do a little exercise now to build on the work you did with your white hat, but this time take a huge step back and dream big. Because the optimist hat is positive. You know, things are going to work out well in this relationship and this negotiation. And when they do, these are the awesome outcomes that are going to happen. Now, the benefits of those to my customer are these, and the value for us as a business in this relationship is this. And the yellow hat does articulate that. It doesn't just dream big. It has some specifics below that dream that bring it to life and make it meaningful and legitimate to your customer. So it's aim high. If it was impossible to fail, says the optimist in Ed de Bono's Yellow Hat, what would I do? And what would the consequence be of those actions? So the exercise I'd like you to do now as yellow hat wearers, using the same scenario you began with the white hat and Pippa, is aim high. Is say, if it was impossible to fail, these are the key outcomes of a successful negotiation. If it was impossible to fail, these are the key outcomes of a successful negotiation. So just to use one example before I give you a moment to think about that yourself. Jester and I were successful in selling to a Japanese business. It's a major brand. I haven't got permission to mention their name, so I'm not going to mention it, but they are truly global and they have 14 divisions. We have been successful in becoming a training partner for 2 divisions. Sole supplier, capability development, 14 divisions globally. Aim high. Okay, so I am going to give you 2 minutes working on the case study that you were working on, real negotiation that's going to come up. Put your yellow hat on and capture in writing, what does absolutely brilliant outcome look like if it was impossible to fail? Your 2 minutes start now. Yes, I love what Tanya's put in the comments here. This is thinking long-term as well. You know, this is going to be a forever relationship. I love that, Tanya. Thank you. Yeah. Aiming high is about not just a contract. It's about a long-term relationship. Great build, Tanya. Thank you. Once you've given your brain an aim high aspiration, everything then gears towards getting there. So that's the optimist yellow hat, possibility thinking, why not? I'm now going to pass you over to Colin, the chairman of Uspire, who's going to talk to you about the red hat. Over to you, Colin.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. As you can see, I'm actually donned in a red shirt, as Mark actually has followed my lead and he's worn a yellow shirt today. However, I did actually manage to find this, which looks like a pirate's hat. So I thought maybe I could wear that for a short period of time, because I think it was Steve Jobs who actually said, would you rather be the captain of a cruise liner or a pirate ship? He also went on to say that intuition is a powerful thing, more powerful than intellect, in his opinion. You can also look at someone like Albert Einstein, who I think I remember him saying that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. He also said we are in danger of creating a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So let's just think about intuition and instinct. My recommendation is learn to trust it. It's more often right than it is wrong. It actually becomes your invisible superpower. And if you want to...
If you give me just 1 second.
I think we've got a bit of background noise. Sorry, folks. If you want to read a book that probably helps you to understand this a little bit, there's a great book by Rick Snyder. It's called Decisive Intuition. And he will talk to you a little bit about being in the zone, and getting into that intuitive zone during a negotiation is actually very, very powerful and important. It comes from actually preparation and knowledge and experience. So intuition doesn't work on its own. It actually comes from building layers and layers of experience and knowledge and understanding, and eventually building into your experience gives you the instinct to be able to deal with a lot of challenging things. So let's go on and talk about what I'm experiencing. Jonathan particularly asked me because of my diverse range of interests where I've invested or worked in business like telecoms, I'm working in high street fashion, we're into health and beauty, we're into fitness. So a variety of different sectors, engineering. So that diversity enables me to actually look at what's actually happening in that marketplace and what sort of disruptions we're seeing. Let me just share a little thing with you right now. This I refer to as the Four Horsemen of the business apocalypse. And it's the challenges that I think most industries are facing at the moment. And it's bringing about tremendous uncertainty. That uncertainty requires you to use your intuition because you'll find that there are not as many facts available. For example, if you look at unpredictable sales, which is the first horse, we've seen during the COVID crisis, some businesses having a benefit. So if you're in the healthcare sector, you're in sort of grocery supermarkets, or if you're in online, then actually during that COVID period, you had the benefit of significantly higher sales. The challenge is, how do you hold on to those sales? The next thing, the negative sectors, those that have been badly disrupted are things like airlines, hospitality. If you didn't have a great deal of e-commerce footprint, you were losing business if you were present on the high street. And I still believe that we have a very difficult 6 months ahead of us. We're 6 months coming out of post-lockdown, and it's very difficult. And a number of businesses that I'm working with are finding that they don't really know how consumer behavior is actually going to change and what the final pattern's going to be to their revenue lines. So without those facts, with that uncertainty, you have to be starting to use that intuition. I also like to refer to it as a business judgment, yeah, because you're relying on that experience and knowledge that you built up over time. The second horse, which is more debt, which is the amount of debt that's actually come into most businesses during this period of time because they've been into enforced lockdowns, had no revenue. And what's happened is that most of them access to government funding. So you've seen things like bounce back loans, CBILS. We're now into a new thing that's going to be recovery loans. And I think a colleague of mine actually might be on this call, a gentleman called Robin Tarling. And if you look at the number of admins and insolvencies that have actually also impacted the marketplace at the moment, there's been a dramatic reduction. Robin, are you there? Can you just give us 30 seconds on sort of what you've seen?
Yes. So I suppose in a way it's been a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, in normal years, there'll probably be about 1,000 companies that go into liquidation every month. Since the pandemic, that has gone down to 500, sometimes even lower than that, a month. So literally the volume of companies going bust has halved at the time when the economy was meant to be at its most distressed, which does sound a bit odd. And the simple reason why it is because the government has thrown so much money at companies, fundamentally. All that's really done is kick the can down the road for 6 months, maybe 12, maybe 18. Perhaps for some firms, it almost certainly has been a lifeline. For others, it's probably a false hope and has just blown a bit more money. And then you have all the issues about directors that have misspent the money that they've got via the bounce back loan, but that's another matter. So so what we're seeing is it's very hard to look at the facts at this stage and draw any obvious conclusions from them, other than to say intuitively, many more companies will probably start going bust next year onwards.
Thanks, Robin. So when you're looking at your supply chain, looking at the companies that actually are going to be providing you with your raw materials or whatever it is that you're buying from them, just reflect on the fact that they're probably taking considerably more debt on their balance sheet. So again, use your intuition about the financial stability of some of the companies, because again, some of the facts, because it's all happened so quickly, might not be available in a set of statutory accounts. The other one is disrupted supply chains. Brexit has had a massive impact on sort of how supply chains are working. I think Mark talked about it's taking sort of a lot longer to get through customs. There's a massive shortage of HGV drivers that you will have read about, where we've been able to actually get them qualified. We've had a lot of foreign HG drivers who are no longer in the country, and shipping container prices have actually doubled or are close to trebling. So all of those things, again, think about what's happening there. Is that going to continue? Use your instinct, use your business judgment. The fourth horse is actually employee uncertainty. Will my employer survive? How do I want to work? Where do I want to work is a question that actually a number of people are asking. There are vast labour shortages actually in the food supply chain at this moment in time, again, caused by Brexit and caused by people actually want to take a different decision. I was talking to a few companies at the moment and also talking to retailers. They're predicting that there's going to be a 20% shortage at Christmas for turkeys, a 15% reduction in hams and gammons available on the supermarket shelves, a 10% reduction in the availability of chicken. There'll be very few staff to pick crops from farmers' fields, actually. There's a particular problem in that area. So there are some again, big challenges. So use the data, use the information, the facts, but at the same time, because a lot of it's happening so quickly, you have to be intuitive. And there is a fifth horse that is actually riding into challenge business at the moment, and that is the one that we've talked about. It's the one of inflation. And I've got another little graph here just to show you briefly. And you can see this was predicted inflation from Statista, who do a lot of government statistics and supply a lot of data. They were talking about 2022, if you can just see it there, showing 1.8% inflation. The government's target was 2%, and yet Reuters, using the Institute of Economic Research, actually declared figures only about 3 weeks ago to suggest it was going to be 3.9%. I think the government has vastly under-predicted what's going on. They don't understand the full impact of everything that's happening around the FMCG world with inflation. I think that figure could easily be 5%. One food company that I'm involved in has had 3 price increases in the last 6 months, and is now preparing for a 4th because of things like freight charges, corrugated costs are going through the roof, and plastics. The other problem is that they have no staff. So if this labour problem I talked about earlier is a major issue, they're increasing labour rates by 10 to 15% because of the scarcity. HGV drivers are getting extra bonuses for actually just turning up for work. So these are sorts of things that they're happening fast. So you need to be thinking about how you use your intuition. So really, just think about a few things I've said. Make a few notes on sort of how you can think about the challenges that are there. Use your intuition, jot down a few thoughts and ideas around this red hat thinking, and negotiate by using those instincts, because ultimately it's not all doom and gloom, because we can be more profitable by ending up with increased cash margins. Thank you. Over to you, Jonathan, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much. And it's great to hear from some of my colleagues. We're going to hear from some more after we have a break. But before we go to a break, I want to give you a chance to just go into a breakout room. We're going to, I don't know how many we've created, but there's probably half a dozen breakout rooms. We're going to push you in just for 3 minutes. And the purpose of that is to get you to share anything that's jumped off the page from any of the hat conversations that we've been having, and any of your reflections. So we're going to go into that for 3 minutes. Then we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back at 25:02, and we're going to go through the next 3 hats. So Chester, if you could push everyone into a breakout room for 3 minutes, that would be terrific.
Everybody's back in the room, Jonathan.
Okay. Well, apologies. I think some of you ended up in breakout rooms with people that had gone away from their computers, so apologies for that. But hopefully we'll have another breakout session after the next 3 hats. So we're going to take 10 minutes now. It's 24 minutes past according to my. So let's come back at 25:02. So do turn your cameras off, go and get a natural break, a coffee, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here at 25 to. See you then. I have a dog.
Alrighty. Maybe seeing lots of cameras coming on there, so I think the stage becomes yours.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us again, and hopefully you had some interesting discussions in your breakout rooms. One of the things we're going to do in the next breakout room, we're going to actually put more people in, because I think there are a few people that have walked away, and obviously we want you to have some discussion in those breakout sessions. So we're talking about the black hat. And my black hat perspective is informed by 4 years I spent in the 90s working in a developing country in West Africa. And the challenges that we are facing now, actually I faced many of those on a daily basis. So we had a soft currency, which meant that everything we had to buy, we were constantly worried about exchange rates. We had very limited supplies of local goods and services, a real shortage of skilled labor, very unreliable inbound and outbound logistics, and rapidly increasing demand. So if any of that sounds familiar, that's why I've got the black hat on. And I want to talk about 4 things that I want you to think about, because there's a danger that when you put the black hat on, life gets a bit miserable. And the truth of it is, it's about being aware of 4 things. I'm going to talk you through. The first thing is obstacles. And these are things that may trip you up, that will trip you up if you don't consider them. They may be regulatory, they may be new government policies, new trade policies, new procedures. We're seeing a lot of changes happening. Some of them are linked to new ways of working. Some of them are linked to the pandemic. Some of them are linked to absolutely just a different way of doing business. So being aware of those obstacles, thinking about them, allows you to prepare for them. You need to also plan for changes in people. Now, people are, important parts of the business, and their emotions. I think one of the challenges we faced as a business is managing all of the emotions in our organization. You have to take time to consider the feelings. And I come from a background where genuinely people would ask me what I feel, and I'd tell them what I think. So when you're having to work in the feeling part of the quadrant, that's actually a learned skill. So I've had to dial up my approach to my team in understanding how they're feeling. And you'll have to do that with your people. How people are, if they're feeling overwhelmed, then here's a mechanism, here's a structured mechanism that will help you come together as a team and share those feelings and your insights. People, it could be about process, it could be about performance, good, bad, and indifferent. What's working well? What's absolutely gone wrong? And what do we need to fix? And what's actually working okay, but we could improve? So we need to plan for understanding those elements. The other obstacles often come from third parties, and they can be affected in different ways, but they can create a lot of noise in the system. So it could be simple things like other customers starting to leverage their scale with your suppliers. So all of a sudden, you're getting security of supply issues, you're getting late deliveries, and you don't understand why, because nothing's changed, you're paying them on time, you're calling off in the same way. So you will find there are going to be some different behaviors, and scale of some of your competitors could be part of that. So do think about third parties when you're considering obstacles. Second point is evidence, and this is slightly different to the white hat, because one of the things we're looking for with the black hat thinking is we're tracking some of those facts, some of those things that were put on our radar during Pippa's discussion. We're now tracking them. And why are we doing that? Well, we're looking to see where they're going, which direction. When they reach certain thresholds, that's going to trigger us to do certain things. So for example, there could be indices around commodity tracking. It could be currency tracking. It could be related to capacity or even things like waste rates. So we are going to be tracking and perhaps creating a dashboard of things that are important to our business. When we see a trend, we should have a plan that says, well, that trend's going this way. That means we now need to do this. We talked about things like commodity prices. I think Colin mentioned corrugate. We talked about freight. What we're seeing pretty much across the piece is commodity that's tracking up. And there are ways in which you can manage that risk. And not everyone will have a treasury department hedging currency, but there are ways you can manage risk in terms of how you create your agreements and your contracts. And actually, one of the things that is really important is that you share that risk. So when you get a supplier coming to you and saying, here's my price increase, here's everything that's going wrong in my world, it's very tempting to take on all those problems. The truth of it is they need to be shared. And the way in which you do that is by creating some long-term, so I think somebody mentioned long-term earlier, some long-term agreements, some flexible agreements that reward shared risk. So if you're trying to defer a price rise, why would they do that? Well, maybe they'll do it because you reset the contract term. So there are those sorts of discussions that you should be having, you should be having. So create that dashboard of these key indicators and look at the trends. Colin talked about, snapshot measures, things like corporate accounts, Dun & Bradstreet. Actually, what we've seen is they can be misleading because there's a phase lag. So I do think your instincts, those relationships that you have with your customers, with your suppliers, you should be talking to them. You should be in regular discussions about the challenges they're facing. You take that shared problem and you'll find a shared solution. If you take a hard positional bargaining approach, which is, I'm not talking to you about price increases, just go away. Well, is that likely to work? I don't think it is. And that's what happens is you build that tsunami and then it hits you all at once. So you need a strategy. You need to be clear about what's tracking in which direction on your dashboard. And that could be things like on-time delivery in full, customer satisfaction, safety stock levels, stock turnover, insurance claims. There's all sorts of things that may be relevant. So that's evidence. Risks. I get a lot of grief in our business because it's always me that's waving the risk flag and saying, well, hang on a minute, what about this? What about that? Actually, it's about understanding what the risk is and mitigating it. So there's two steps to risk. You identify it and then you plan for how you're going to deal with it. If you identify risk and say, well, because of that risk, we're not going to do anything, actually, I think you've missed the point. So that risk could be in your supply chain. It could be supplier resilience. So we heard earlier that there will be a lot of businesses that fail in the next 12 months. And the only reason they haven't failed is because they've had access to government loans and cheap money. So I think we need to be really on it in terms of customer supplier resilience. So if you're facing the customers, you should be looking at how much credit you're prepared to extend to that customer. If you're facing back into suppliers, you should be looking at how much commitment you're going to make to those suppliers given their potential resilience. And it's a good indication if they have invested in capacity and they have got confidence and they are sharing information, it's a good indication that they've had the yellow hat on and they're feeling very positive, and they're on a good trajectory. We talk about devil's advocate, and I actually talk about understanding the perfect storm. And it's a phrase that's widely used, but what does that mean? Well, for me, maybe the perfect storm is defined by everything that could go wrong, does go wrong, and pretty much at the same time. So, for example, you've got a key local supplier that fails. At the same time, your currency devalues and your backup supplier becomes uncompetitive. That's an example of a perfect storm. And it's important that you then tip into the fourth area, which is scenario planning. And this is something that actually the oil industry does very well. If you look at the oil volatility in the last 12 months, they do this well because this is built into their DNA. Many businesses don't do it. And typically we would recommend 3 scenarios. What is the worst case, the perfect storm? You should have a plan. Obviously, we hope it doesn't happen, but you should know what you need to do if it does happen. And you should be able to see those trends and whether it's heading that way. You should have a best case scenario. Yellow hat on. What's the best case? What do we need to do to make sure we can deliver? You know, suddenly everyone wants our services. Actually, can we get more capacity? Can we protect the quality? Can we ensure we deliver on time? So you need a plan for best case. And then you need some sort of mix that says this is what we think is likely. So my recommendation as Black Hat is think about the obstacles, be aware of them, plan for them. Track the evidence that you saw with the White Hat. And when you see certain trends, it should trigger certain actions. Be aware of the risks, but don't just be aware of them, have a plan to mitigate them. And lastly, think about at least 3 scenarios that will help your business as it moves forward, and potentially you move from best case to worst case and back to somewhere in the middle. So that's my Black Hat thinking. Hopefully that's been of value and it sparked some thoughts. I'm now going to pass on to Chester, who'll be wearing a very attractive green hat. Over to you, Chester.
Thanks very much, JB. Appreciate that. Green hats. So we're moving into options, which segues beautifully around that hexagon shape that Jonathan gave you and talked about scenarios. So let's build in those scenarios, think about options, but let's use that intuitive and that creative energy, that yellow and that red hat, as we start to think about the proposals that you start to draw together. How are you going to nurture a relationship in this intuitive environment? And I'm going to start with a question, and I'm going to ask you to drop the answers into the chat facility. So if you move your mouse around the screen, there'll be a toolbar that comes up at the bottom and you should have chat. I'm going to ask you to write your answer in it, and I'm going to ask you to stop before you hit send. I want everybody to send that together. We can create what's called a chat storm, just to see everybody's answer coming in all at the same time. So I'm going to take my background off now, just so that you can see the question that I have for you. What is the most critical and finite resource in any negotiation? What is the most critical and finite resource in any negotiation? And I'm going to ask you to share your chat and press send now. Trust. Oh, interesting. Trust as well. Time from Paula, time from Sally. Integrity and goodwill. So there's an element of trust, absolutely, but there's definitely an element of time. And time is going to be the thing that I'm going to be talking about here. So I love the fact that people have got the fact that thinking beyond the box. Time. Most of us, when we're thinking about negotiation, will think laterally. We'll be thinking linearly. We'll be thinking about binary things. And for example, it might be a unit commodity over time, for example. Something might go up, something might come down over time. And what you tend to put in a negotiation is a linear linkage. If you then, and we either do something positive or we do something negative. Okay, linear linkage, and that might be thinking about the volume that you do over time, but that might equally be price. It might be credit terms, that you change the credit terms over time, and you might step things, so they might not be, or you might find when you hit a trigger point, something kicks in. All of this is very linear thinking. But Colin talked about intuition and that times are changing, and therefore we need to think more laterally. So my second question, just to get you in the thought process of thinking laterally, is to think about great inventors. So I'm going to ask you to go into the chat facility again and answer this question. Who in your mind are the greatest inventors of all time? Who in your mind are the greatest inventors of all time? And just hit send when you're ready. Bill Gates, Edison, Bell, Oh, Bella and Edison. Jobs. Got Gates again coming up. Who else have we got there? Michelangelo, Elon Musk. Claire, talk to me about Elon Musk. Just talk to me about Elon Musk, Claire, if you can come off mute. Talk to me about how he has created and is an inventor.
So I've watched quite a few sort of videos and interviews and podcasts that he's done, and I just found him really fascinating because he just he really looks at things differently. So he kind of he plans for what we don't think is possible. So for example, he's talking about implanting microchips in people's brains. You know, so decades in the future, potentially everyone's going to be some form of AI. Currently, he's talking about fixing people with brain injuries, and that's the purpose. But he's looking a lot longer term and seeing how, you know, the future could look if everyone is kind of, I guess, part, I guess, cyborg, I think they call it.
Cyborg, absolutely. He's using this concept of time, but he's looking broadly. He's thinking things in a linear fashion. He's thinking about things in a linear fashion. And he's kind of taking the idea of what happens over here and over here and over here might be able to impact my bottom line or my dollars or my euros. Okay. He's looking at AI and thinking about microchips, and he's connecting that in. Benjamin Franklin created electricity in 1752. Think of the innovation that has come on the back of that creation. It's driven electronics, and electronics have driven smartphones. Smartphones with audible communication have meant that you don't now need a fixed line. You can be mobile. And people have lifted that lateral thinking through inventions elsewhere and have built those into their proposals. So when we're thinking about options and we're thinking about creativity, look beyond the immediacy of your world. Think, what if? And green hat thinking is all about thinking, what if we did something different? What if we took it to an extreme and then dialed it back a little bit? What if we managed risk in a different way, to use Jonathan's? So that's what green hat thinking is all about. And I'm going to pivot nicely into Amanda, who's going to take us through the blue hat. Amanda.
Hi everybody. Hello. So let me get my hat on and my key message. Can you read that? Okay. Key message, be ready. Let me tell you about my worst negotiation ever. So brand new in, this is years ago, brand new in from KP Foods into McVitie's. There I went. Jaffa Cakes, one of the biggest brands, new customer, Iceland Frozen Foods. Pretty good negotiators. I went in a lamb to the slaughter. I sold in a bog off. This one says 2 for 1 sports lessons. Mine said 2 for 1 Jaffa Cakes. I didn't realize that I needed to change the margin for the promotion. They said they could sell £1 million worth. I was made up. The volume was fantastic. What happened? It was a 2-week promotion. They sold £1 million worth in 1 weekend. And I was completely hammered for loss of sales by my colleagues because I hadn't told them what I was doing, by my boss who told me that a monkey could have sold in a bog off, and it was horrendous. So learning that I had personally. So let's talk about how we go about using the blue hat thinking, which is all about staying organized and being ready. Let's do that so you can see my eyes. Thank you. Right, so I'm just going to share my room. Lovely, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, so be ready. There are 3 things I want to talk to you about around be ready, and it's all about blue hat thinking. For those of you who do want to know about the colours and insights, we've got a session coming up in November about that. For those of you who do, blue hat fits brilliantly with the colours, because blue hat is all about being organised, being ready, analysing, having the data ready, and planning, which is fantastic. So let's have a look. I'm going to do that so you can see. I'm going to move in a moment. Fantastic. Right, so number 1, 3 things. Number 1, plan. There are 3 things we recommend absolutely everybody in any situation does in terms of planning, and they are these. Have a wish list. Make it huge. Get 30 things on your list, 30 or 40 things that actually you'd like from this customer, all the way through the lifetime of the customer, not just on this negotiation. Have a negotiation plan. Write down a plan. However, whichever words you choose to use, make sure you're clear about what's essential. You know, what do you think? Where do you think you're going to end up? But more importantly, what's your aspiration? What's your aim high? What's the best case scenario in terms of winning? I was just in the breakout with Claire. Claire's from Treasury Wines, and Claire's got a background in sales and has moved into a shopper marketing role. And actually, from a shopper marketing role, not least that we've got to work with suppliers to deliver cardboard, etc., etc. We've also got to think about what are all the tradables that we need, and it isn't just price, margin, volume, you know, which my one was with Jaffa cakes. There are so many things that we need to get on our wish list. So you might want to be having things like, as I say, the cardboard. It might be space, it might be timing, it might be you know, particularly wanting something at Christmas, whatever it might be for your business. So we need to think about that. The second thing is about alignment. And when I talk about alignment, this is the people aspect. And this is where I completely fell down with my Jaffa cakes, because what I did was I didn't really tell anybody. I thought everybody's going to be delighted at £1 million worth of Jaffa cakes. But actually they weren't. They weren't delighted at all, in fact. So we need to make sure that we've got our stakeholders aligned. We use something called the stakeholder map that some of you might have seen. But basically what the stakeholder map does is it allows you to think about who exactly do you need? Who exactly do you need to influence for this particular negotiation decision? Who do you need to influence? By the way, in my case, there were a myriad of people I needed to influence before I even got to the customer. So start with internal. Start with internal. And one of the things we do in the stakeholder map, we talk about who are ambassadors, who are our critics, and who is on the fence, needs to be persuaded, or you need to ask them a brilliant questions to find out. So stakeholder alignment is critical. I did not tell my boss what I'd done. And it was such a learning, because actually what he then had to do, he had to go in as the white knight and solve the problem for me. And that didn't help my self-esteem. It certainly didn't help him, because it was a surprise. And, you know, it didn't help the customer relationship, which took a bit of rebuilding. So think about who you need to align. And then finally, this is critical. Blue hat thinking is being ready always. And we need to be ready at all points in a negotiation to make sure that we have all of the facts and all of those different hats, the thinking around all of those different hats ready. James O'Connor was in my breakout, and James said, you know, it's all very well planning and getting it all sorted, but what happens when, he didn't use these words, but what happens when you get a side swipe from the customer? What happens when it changes? And boy, is it changing at the moment. So write up what you've agreed. We call it an agreement tracker. Agree what you've agreed. Agree what you've agreed at every stage in the negotiation. Follow up. regularly. If you say you're going to check and say you're going to review, then do so. And then in terms of review, remember that, you know, if you've organized a contract or you've organized a price, that it might need to change. Certainly at the moment, contracts may need to change. So review really regularly and be transparent. Yeah, you're not on track here. We need to think about what we're going to do about that. We need to think about renegotiating and so on. A really whistle-stop tour of the kinds of materials, the kinds of ways of working that you need to have in your business to be able to shine. I'm going to pass over to Andrew for 1 minute. Andrew is from Kerry, and he has done a brilliant job with Kerry Foods in terms of embedding some of the planning stage of negotiation. Andrew, over to you.
Hello, hi, thanks Amanda. Morning all. I guess, yeah, I mean, look, it's it might be an obvious point, but the level of planning that we do will be very different from a daily negotiation, like a green promotion, something like that, versus a JBP or a full business tender. I think the important thing that we found is that there is some planning that goes into both. And whether that's a full use of all the tools and influencing plans and all that sort of thing, or just having an ODE and a written objective. But the biggest benefit we've certainly found is around alignment. Amanda called it out. I think the obvious piece is around aligning your internal cross-functional teams and your senior leaders. But I'd also say from a salesperson's perspective, bringing the customer into that and making sure our business are aware of our customers' pressures, our customers' strategies and their needs will certainly help to build a successful plan. Whether that's out of facts or intuition or any of the other hats, you know, having that customer in that alignment plan definitely helps. And I think the biggest benefit of that and the biggest benefit of alignment from a very selfish personal perspective is breathing space. If you have your senior leaders and the rest of the business bought into your plan ahead of time, then you avoid, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but you avoid being pestered for updates, having to distract yourself for internal meetings and internal reporting rather than actually getting on with doing the job of the negotiation and being in the moment and in the plan. So that for me, the alignment piece is something that we've really had benefit from. And I would encourage you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution. So people, the blue hat is about being ready. Think about planning, written planning. I used to call it the us and them spreadsheet to make sure you're clear, whatever move you make in your negotiation, that you're clear about what the impact's going to be in every possible way for you and for your customer. Think about alignment using those, think about all of the stakeholders, as Andrew just said, internal and external stakeholders. And some of them may not be, you know, just all the bosses, actually. You may have stores involved, you may have factories involved, and there may be packaging people involved. There may be all sorts of different areas that need to be involved. And then finally, track. Tracking is critical. Agree what you've agreed at every stage. You know, Andrew works for Kerry Foods. Some of those negotiations with a business like Kerry Foods, who are negotiating humongous, great big own label contracts, can last 6 months. So make sure that you absolutely track and agree what you've agreed as you go through. This is not the time for the old-fashioned handshake. Yeah, that'll be fine, won't it? Cheers, thanks very much. It's absolutely the time to plan really, really carefully. So be ready. Over to you, JB.
Look at that. I even got a little message that said, remember to unmute yourself. So look, thank you. First of all, thank you to all my colleagues, and thank you also to Andrew for sharing some of his thoughts as well at the end there. Hopefully now you've got this sheet in some form and you've worked your way around, you've captured some of your insights. And what we're going to do now is put you back into some slightly larger breakout rooms just to share some of the key themes, We're going to do that for, I think, 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to take you through a worked example that I have here, which is based on putting through a price increase, which I know is, whether you're trying to defend against it or you're trying to actually push it through for your business, I know that's something of real interest. So I've done a worked example. So look, let's take 5 minutes. So look, what I wanted to do was really to wrap this session up, and hopefully you've all had a chance with your negotiation challenge to think about the different hats. I think in our group we had this great discussion about, it gives you permission to put a different hat on in a meeting, to actually look at something from a different perspective, whether it's the black hat, the devil's advocate, whether it's facts, whether it's using your intuition. It creates a signpost for you to actually share that perspective. And I think it's really powerful in preparing for negotiations. I've done a worked example, and for those of you who sign up for a coaching session, we will share this example with you. But just to give you some highlights, I started with the challenge of an 8% price increase, and the facts were that it's needed in January because we've done some business analysis that says our margins being eroded. We actually want, in this particular worked example, to reduce the range because we're trying to increase the volume of the products that are selling. And actually we want to do something called increasing the minimum order quantity. That's the white hat thinking. The positives, just a few of the positives. We're trying to improve lead times, increase stock levels, and improve on-time delivery in full. So that's why we're doing it. We've absorbed costs for over a year, and we've got some of our own frustrations. So we're looking to try and create the right relationship, and that has to be a relationship based on performing. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing it. We've got to persuade the customers that these increases are valid. We will trade the length of agreement for phasing in that price increase. So we've got a plan that says, you know, if you're prepared to do something different, be flexible with us, we will phase and share some of those price increases. But we are going to have to reduce the range of products to ensure we can achieve our on-time delivery targets. In terms of our best ideas, actually, we think phasing the price increase over 2 6-month periods might be attractive, and we'll do that in exchange for a 2-year contract. We're going to notify our customers now because we've got really 2 or 3 months to negotiate, and we expect it to be some difficult conversations. A formal letter will be going out to all the sales directors we operate with. When that lands, our phones, our emails are going to go crazy. Actually, we need to be prepared for that, and we probably need to reach out to them even in advance and say there's something coming. When it lands, let's have a conversation. So that's our simple walk round. You've probably got your own negotiation challenge. I really hope today you found it of value, just listening to at least 6 different perspectives, I think, and a 7th from Andrew. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A now, I believe, Chester. So there may be some questions that you've got for us. We're happy to field them, any of us from Uspire. There may be some in the chat as well. And then we're going to just move into a wrap-up session after. So I think we're going to do, what, 5 or 10 minutes Q&A, Chester? So if anyone's got a question, if you want to take yourself off mute or share a question, or we want to pick one from the chat, we'll try and field that for you now.
Yeah, maybe we can just have people raise an electronic hand, maybe, and then we can just make sure that we're not talking over one another. Are there questions for any of the speakers? Questions for any of the speakers, and or specifically Jonathan's, who is the subject matter expert here?
It looks like Tanya. Tanya has a question, if you'd like to.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do have a question. I'd love to hear your opinion. Am I heard?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So guys, all right, so this is a brilliant session. I really thank you everyone so much, and I'm thoroughly enjoying, and have a lot of takeaways, even though I've been in sales so many years. Mark is laughing. Yeah, there's always something new to top up your knowledge, but I've got a very particular situation. I'd like to hear your opinion on how you negotiate when you've got a disruptive product. So obviously, there's no point in making SWOT analysis against the competitor or all sorts of things that we normally do to prepare for the negotiation. The main, I'd say maybe the only challenge here is actually that you've got that type of psychology of a customer. Oh, why would I be the first? So even though the product is brilliant, absolutely ticks all the boxes in terms of key drivers of my NHS customers, like, for example, the patient safety, they're still kind of, in two minds, and they're still kind of, okay, who else is using it? So they want to double check and so on. So that's the thing. I'm aware of a brilliant book. I used to be working for McGraw Hill in Australia, and there's a brilliant book to whoever sells, disruptive product. It's called Selling in a New Market by Brian Burns and Tom Snyder. And I've got most of it, but I would love your opinion, guys, because you're experts and you've been around. And yeah, how do you go about that? Thank you.
Okay, Tanya, look, well, thank you. And it's a great question. It's a question we've had before. And one of the things that strikes me about that, and you already flagged it in actually the question, you're dealing with a conservative organization, a government-backed organization like the NHS, by its nature, doesn't want to take enormous amounts of risk. So when you're creating new products and launching new products, you've got to go beyond selling the benefits. You've got to de-risk it for them. Now, what do I mean by de-risking? And I can't give you a long answer, but I'll give you a short answer now. Create a mechanism that makes it easy for them to try it. It's risk-free. Try it, pilot it, do it at a small scale. There's very potentially little cost, lots of support to make sure it goes well. When that's successful, their confidence levels will increase, and then you can have the conversation about how you roll it out. So don't go for the big bang, go for the proof of concept, the pilot, and de-risk it. You'll have more success, particularly with a disruptive product. That's my thought for the day on that. Anyone else from the team got any builds on that?
The only one I would add is the end user. Anybody who's buying any product has the end user in sight at all times. So understand and educate and prove what that benefit is to the person that they're buying it for.
Good. Any other questions?
Yes, we've got one here. If you're a neutral black cat, are there any tips? If you're a natural black cat, are there any tips for you to be more yellow? So why don't we come to Mark, given the fact that he was that yellow hat?
Yeah, I almost intimated it in the exercise about if it was impossible to fail. So it's a dream state, in an ideal world, what would the perfect outcome be? And although that sounds exactly just repeating what I said before, it's actually a good state to give yourself a question that enables dream thinking, big thinking. So if money was not involved in this decision, what could we do is an enabling yellow optimistic perspective. So ask yourself the question that opens the mind to breakthrough thinking.
Can I just add to that? Actually, if you struggle to be that creative persona and that thought-provoking person that you think you need to be, challenge yourself. What would Elon Musk do? What would Bill Gates do? Put it into another perspective so that you can see them doing it. You might find that a lot easier.
And now let me just finally add, give yourselves time to think. So, organize, my blue hat would say, organize time to think. And if you are naturally black hat, you need others around you. Yeah, need others around you. So you need time to think with others.
Yeah. And I think actually that's a perfect wrap up for us. So I think we want to move to, I think, Amanda, you and Colin have got some things to close out on. We've given you a mechanism today and a tool that will help give you that time to think. I really do encourage you to work with your colleagues. There may be some natural fits with some of the hats. And, if there's a natural yellow hat and there's a natural green hat or red hat, whatever, then absolutely do this. I would encourage you to do it in the right sequence. That's the sequence we've created from white through to blue. That will give you a lot of insight. And whether you do it online or in person with a big poster on the wall, you'll find it a really effective way to pull together your thoughts for a challenging negotiation. And we wish you lots of luck with those negotiations. And we hope we get a chance to do some more work with you in the future. So I'm going to hand back, I think, to you, Amanda, if I'm right.
Okay, Colin, actually. Yeah, so Colin's going to, Colin, our chair, is going to finish up. So let me.
Thank you very much.
Share screen.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been very fascinating. Really enjoyed listening to you. I guess as I made a note here and said that the sort of the hat thinking made me feel as if that the person we were talking about here was a mixture of James Dyson, Sherlock Holmes, Sigmund Freud, Travis Kalanick of Uber for his instincts in terms of what he did, maybe the listening skills of the bat and the observational skills of an eagle. So I think if we can get that all in a blender, we're probably going to master everything that's in front of us. I think my intuition also told me once that if somebody says to you, "I'll meet you halfway in a negotiation," it usually means that they're actually standing on what they consider to be the dividing line. So that's another important element. So really what we'd like to do today is sort of talk to you a little bit about how Uspire works and obviously sort of our network proposition as well in particular. We focus on increasing awareness and effectiveness of leaders. Yeah? And what's happened is research shows us that 85% of business leaders actually acknowledge that they will benefit from a peer-to-peer learning and coaching experience. However, 43% never find the time to look, 26% cannot find it when they go searching for it, and 20% that finally find it, on average, achieve significant enhanced results, both personally and professionally. So after today's event, you can do sort of really one of three things. Firstly, hope you enjoyed it, the experience, and we perhaps will never hear from you again. However, we'd rather you not do that. The second thing is please sign up for a free 1-hour coaching session and get the added benefit from today. And we'll take you perhaps through a couple of these models again and talk to you about your thoughts. The third one is to book a find out more call and actually listen to how the Uspire proposition can deliver something like a 5-to-1 return for your company. We have absolutely wonderful testimonials from our members. They talk about how Uspire has changed their lives, created greater returns for their companies, and helped them personally to achieve their goals and ambitions. So we'd like to share all of that with you. So please get in touch. I think, Amanda, our next event is Discover the Power of Presenting with Impact. So that's actually going to be an overload of yellow energy, from our friend Mark Francis. And this is a wonderful session. If any of you have heard it, then you'll know sort of the takeaways are absolutely marvelous. So we look forward to that. And I think we're following on with another one, Amanda, coming up. And Amanda does this work exceptionally well. She helps you to look at your leadership style and takes you through the whole concept of the different colours that actually tend to dominate your personal way of dealing with business challenges. So thank you again. It's been a great session. Jonathan, you've inspired us all. So we hope to see you all again soon.